Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are plumbing the depths of a truly astonishing historical figure, Epictetus, born around AD 55 in Hierapolis. His life began under, well, the darkest possible circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, his name itself, Epictetus.
Right, it ironically meant acquired.
Exactly, acquired,
Mm.
emphasizing his status as property, basically a slave in the Roman world.
It's hard to even wrap your head around that.
Yeah.
Yet this man, born with absolutely zero social standing, no legal rights, he would become maybe the world's most enduring and radical teacher on how to achieve absolute inner freedom.
And that paradox that, the master of inner freedom being born as actual chattel, that's really the core of what we want to explore today.
Right.
Our mission, let's say, is specifically to move beyond just the usual kind of abstract presentation of his philosophy.
Mm.
We want to focus really intensely on the biographical crucible of his life.
Mm.
How did his circumstances, being a slave, later in exile, how did those things directly forge his revolutionary ideas? Ideas about resilience, about the unbreachable power of the human will.
So we're drawing on deep biographical texts, philosophical analyses of Stoicism itself, and tracing connections to other big Roman Stoics, people like Seneca, and maybe most importantly, Marcus Aurelius.
Yeah, definitely Marcus. And this isn't just, dry history. It's like a study in applied psychology forged under absolutely immense pressure.
That's a great way to put it.
And the central paradox for you, the listener, the thing we're really digging into is this. How can someone be physically enslaved, completely lacking social, political freedom, and yet achieve genuine psychological sovereignty? Real inner freedom.
It feels incredibly relevant today, doesn't it? Even without physical chains, we feel bombarded. Information overload, tech demands, all these external pressures kind of chipping away at our sense of autonomy.
Absolutely. Epictetus proved, I think, that the human mind contains a sanctuary, a kind of fortress that no tyrant, no external force can truly touch, if you cultivate it right.
Okay, so let's unpack this journey. We need to start with the sheer brutality of his origins because you can't understand the philosophy without understanding the life.
You really can't. To appreciate the depth of his thought, we absolutely have to confront the profound indignity of his initial status. Born around AD 55, probably in Hierapolis, modern Turkey, and that name, Epictetus, acquired.
We keep coming back to that, but it's crucial.
It is. In the Roman world, it wasn't just a label. It was a constant public marker. You are property. Your identity depends entirely on who owns you.
And it wasn't just a legal thing, was it? His body literally bore the marks of his subjugation.
That's what the sources suggest. Most agree he was physically lame. Now, the exact cause, well, it's debated, but several accounts point to torture. Maybe a severe beating by his first owner.
Which, if true, means his experience with bodily suffering, with the limits of physical cruelty, started incredibly early. It must have cemented this idea of the body's vulnerability in his mind right from the get-go.
Definitely. He was a slave, probably poor for most of his life, perpetually without the rights, the social freedom that Roman citizens just took for granted. This is the world he had to figure out who he was in.
But then something shifts. A critical divergence, as you called it. He gets a different owner.
Yes, a figure named Epaphroditus. Now, Epaphroditus is interesting himself. He was a freedman, someone who would have been slave, but rose to become secretary of the imperial household under Emperor Nero. Pretty high up.
Okay, so maybe he had some empathy, or at least recognized potential. He sounds like that classic trope, the enlightened second owner.
Perhaps. Affluent enough, maybe enlightened enough, whatever the reason. He gave Epictetus this absolutely transformative opportunity to study, and not just anywhere, but under the preeminent Stoic philosopher of the time, Gaius Musonius Rufus.
Wow. So a slave studying high philosophy right there in the hornet's nest of Roman power, under Nero's nose, basically.
It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
And Musonius Rufus was a major figure, very focused on practical application, not just theory. He taught the standard 3 parts of Stoicism, which we probably should unpack quickly because they really formed the bedrock for Epictetus's later ideas.
Yeah, let's do that. Logic, physics, and ethics. They weren't just academic boxes, were they?
Not at all. They were tools for living. First, you have logic. And this wasn't just, formal syllogisms. It was about training your reasoning ability for everyday life, protecting yourself from fallacies, from self-deception, making sure you, as a rational animal, use reason well.
Okay, practical reasoning skills. Got it.
Second was physics. Now, this often throws people off. It wasn't just about atoms and void. Fundamentally, it was about understanding man's place in the cosmos. Your relationship to the gods or the divine order, the logos, providence, whatever term you use. It provided the context for understanding your fate, what happens to you.
Ah, so physics sets the stage for accepting what happens, for understanding the bigger picture.
Precisely. It gives you the framework. And finally, ethics, which again wasn't about lists of rules like we might think today. It was focused squarely on the question, how must I behave, what must I do to achieve a good, flourishing life? What the Greeks called eudaimonia.
And Musonius Rufus taught this how. Not just lectures.
No, definitely not just dry lectures. He used a really vivid style, apparently quite brusque, very practical, lots of anecdotes, sometimes even black humor or hyperbole. Striking comparisons, methods that Epictetus absolutely mastered later on. He was learning philosophy not as some intellectual game, but as essential psychological survival gear.
And this training, this intense philosophical boot camp, is happening right in the middle of some incredibly turbulent times politically.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking the reigns of Nero, then Vespasian,
Yeah.
then Domitian, an era really defined by imperial tyranny, by extravagance, corruption, and just profound political instability. Think Caligula, think Nero. It was a wild time.
And Stoicism wasn't just sitting quietly on the sidelines, was it? It became sort of political.
Very much so. This is key. Stoicism got adopted by many elite Romans, senators, influential figures, because its core values, things like rectitude, simplicity, self-discipline, standing firm against corruption, these resonated with traditional Roman virtues. But they also stood in pretty stark opposition to the moral decay, and often the outright depravity of the imperial courts, especially under someone like Nero.
So you get this tension, what historians call the Stoic opposition, not like an organized party, right? More a movement.
Exactly. Not a party-plotting revolution, but more a philosophical stance that guided public life for certain individuals. High-ranking senators, intellectuals, who used Stoic principles to push back, often subtly, sometimes openly, against imperial overreach. That analogy you used earlier, the Jedi Knights resisting the Galactic Empire, it's kind of fitting, actually, and incredibly dangerous for them.
Yeah, deadly dangerous. You mentioned Helvidius Priscus before.
Right. A perfect example. Priscus was a tribune, later a senator. Renowned for his unwavering commitment to old-school Republican virtues, very stoic in his outlook. He famously refused to just, rubber stamp Emperor Vespasian's decisions in the Senate. He challenged him directly, even after being warned to back down.
And the result?
Vespasian had him executed. His death sent a very clear message. Living out these philosophical principles too openly, too rigidly, could be seen as treason. It could get you killed.
So, if powerful senators are getting executed for living like Stoics, what about a prominent Stoic teacher like Musonius Rufus or his student Epictetus? Even if Epictetus started his property, the teachings themselves must have seemed subversive.
Absolutely. The moment your philosophy teaches that a person can be inwardly sovereign, that their true self is untouched by the emperor's power, well, that's inherently a political threat to an autocrat, especially someone like Domitian later on.
Domitian seems particularly relevant here. He wasn't exactly known for his tolerance.
Not at all. Domitian was notoriously paranoid. He saw any form of independent thought, any group that promoted self-sufficiency and moral integrity over blind obedience to him, as dangerous. Philosophers, with their talk of reason and inner freedom, were high on his list of potential troublemakers.
Yeah.
They undermined the very foundation of his absolute rule.
And his response wasn't subtle. It was a sweeping action.
Massive, yeah.
Yeah.
In AD 95, Domitian issues this edict. All philosophers are expelled from Rome. Just gone.
Wow. Not just targeting one or two difficult senators, but a blanket ban on the entire profession, essentially.
Exactly. It was about silencing a whole class of thinkers who represented an alternative source of authority, moral authority, rational authority, distinct from his own imperial power.
Yeah.
And Epictetus, the former slave who had become this respected teacher, he gets caught up in this dragnet. He's expelled along with everyone else.
So he's forced out, exiled from the center of the Roman world by, let's face it, an insecure tyrant. That experience of exile, being pushed out by external force, coupled with his physical lameness, that constant reminder of his body's vulnerability, it must have just crystallized his philosophical focus, right?
It seems almost inevitable, doesn't it?
Well,
He relocated to Nicopolis over in Epirus in what's now Greece, and he set up his own school there. This moment, this final act of external constraint, it really seems to have pushed him to fully articulate and solidify the doctrine that the only true unshakable freedom, the only real sanctuary, has to be entirely internal. He'd lived through slavery, possibly torture, now exile. He was testing his philosophy against the absolute worst life could throw at him repeatedly.
okay, so this is the perfect point to transition. Let's dive into the core of that philosophical response to tyranny, to suffering, to everything life threw at him, his doctrine of sovereignty. And it starts with that famously blunt idea. the dichotomy of control.
Yes, this is the absolute foundation. You can't understand Epictetus without getting this, and it feels like a direct response to the chaos and lack of control he experienced. He starts with this incredibly straightforward assertion. Things in the universe are either up to us or they are not up to us, period. Your first job is to sort everything you encounter into one of those two baskets.
Okay, so what precisely did he put in that first basket, the up to us basket? What is our domain of complete autonomous power?
It's entirely internal. It's the realm of the will, our faculty of choice, what he called prohairesis. This includes our judgments, how we interpret things, our impulses, what we feel drawn to do or avoid, our opinions, our desires, our aversions. Basically, the inner world of our mind, our rational faculties' decisions. This is the only realm where we are truly king.
And everything else, our physical body, our health, our possessions, money, social reputation, our job, worldly success, what other people think of us, all that goes in the other basket.
Exactly. All of that is not up to us. These are what the Stoics famously termed indifference. Now, that doesn't mean they have no value, but they have no value in terms of our core moral worth, our eudaimonia. They are external to our will.
And here's the kicker, the connection for us listening today.
Right. Epictetus argues forcefully that if you intentionally stake your happiness, your peace of mind, on securing any of these external indifference, let's say getting that promotion or maintaining a perfect image online or having everyone like you, you have effectively handed over control of your happiness to things you don't control, to luck, to fate, or worse, to the whims and opinions of other people.
You've made yourself a psychological slave to externals.
Precisely. Frustration, anxiety, disappointment, anger. These are the guaranteed results of misplacing your focus.
It is striking, isn't it? How much of modern anxiety and unhappiness seems to stem from exactly this misclassification. We pour so much energy into trying to control things that are fundamentally outside the bounds of our prohairesis, our volition.
We really do. It's the constant failure to distinguish what's truly ours, our judgments, our choices from what's borrowed or external. If you're terrified of being insulted, Epictetus would say the person insulting you owns a piece of you. If you're miserable because your investment's tanked, the market owns you. You've given your power away.
So his definition of true freedom, then, had to be completely untethered from social or political status. It had to be purely psychological, purely attitudinal.
Absolutely. He defined true freedom as unimpededness, a state where you only do and experience what you truly want because your internal decisions, your will, are never blocked or constrained by external circumstances because you only want what is actually up to you. That's the path to serenity, to ataraxia.
Okay, let's talk about that really radical statement he makes about his own body. Given his personal history with lameness, maybe even torture, this is incredibly powerful.
This is, for me, the absolute apex of his argument, that you can feel the lived experience behind it. Epictetus draws this incredibly sharp line between the alienable body, the thing that can be chained, beaten, made lame, killed, and the unbreachable fortress of the rational mind. He famously declared, and you can almost hear him saying it, "You can fetter my leg, but not even Zeus himself can overcome my volition," prohairesis.
Wow. Just let that sink in, the sheer force of that, especially from a man whose leg might have been fettered or broken. He's saying, essentially, my body is just stuff. It's external. It's disposable property in the grand scheme of things. But my rational mind, my power to choose my response, that is sacred, untouchable.
He's identifying the prohairesis, the rational will, as the only true individual self. And he goes even further, calling it a portion of God, a fragment of the divine logos, the rational principle that orders the universe. Because God, or nature, designed this core rational capacity to be inherently invulnerable and unconstrained when used correctly, no earthly power, not Nero, not Domitian, not physical pain, can truly conquer it. It's the ultimate declaration of human dignity found not in status, but within.
Okay, but this radical identification of the self with the rational will leads directly to what many find the most challenging part of Stoicism. This idea of a total personal responsibility for every single emotion. This is where people often say, come on, that's impossible.
It is challenging, absolutely. Because our modern intuition, maybe influenced by psychology or just common experience, often treats emotions as these involuntary things that happen to us, that wash over us, that assault us. Epictetus, however, along with the broader Stoic tradition, charges the individual with, yes, total personal responsibility for each and every one of your emotions. Fear, anger, grief, even joy. In a way, these aren't just passive happenings. They are, fundamentally, the result of acts of will, conditioned by the judgments we make about external events.
So the feeling of misery isn't caused directly by the external event, losing a job, being criticized, but by the interpretation, the judgment we attach to that event.
Precisely. Extreme negative emotions, what the Stoics called passions,
Hmm.
telecrators, they originate from faulty interpretations, incorrect judgments that we attach to external events, to those indifference. Someone insults you. The insult itself, just sound waves or maybe pixels on a screen. It only becomes disturbing, emotionally upsetting once you assent to a judgment about it. The judgment might be, being insulted is a terrible harm, it diminishes my worth, it's unjust, it must not happen. That judgment, that act of mental assent, that is the act of will that generates the anger or the hurt.
Okay, but practically, how does someone stop that? It feels automatic. If someone cuts me off in traffic, my heart pounds. I feel anger before I consciously think I judge this to be bad. This immediacy is what makes Stoicism seem superhuman or emotionally repressive to many.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And Epictetus provides a crucial technique. It's about resisting that immediate, almost instinctual impulse to react, to assent to the initial impression. Fantasia. He tells us, when faced with a potentially disturbing impression, the insult, the financial loss, the scary news headline, you must pause. Create a space.
A cognitive gap.
Exactly. You need to gain cognitive distance. You have to say to yourself mentally, hold on, this is just an impression and is not necessarily the reality it claims to represent. Let me examine it.
It sounds almost like a form of mindfulness, really, forcing that crucial break between the stimulus and the automatic response.
It's very much like that. You could call it the original cognitive behavioral therapy technique. That pause, that moment of reflection, allows your reason, your prohairesis, to step in, examine the impression, and test its validity against Stoic principles. Is this thing truly harmful, or is it merely an indifferent parable? If you judge the impression rationally, say, okay, this setback is inconvenient, it's dispreferred, but it doesn't touch my core self, my virtue, then it cannot hijack your mind and lead to those uncontrolled, irrational, emotional actions. Mastering that pause, that ability to withhold immediate assent, is mastering your inner freedom.
Okay, so if we accept that the mind, the prohairesis, is sovereign, how does Epictetus teach us to actually use that sovereignty when we're facing the genuinely harsh realities of the world? Things like, well, political exile, chronic pain, loss. It can't just be about stoically enduring, can it? It has to be about somehow utilizing the suffering.
Absolutely. It's not passive endurance at all. Epictetus taught that adversity isn't some cosmic punishment or a sign you failed. It's actually necessary. It's the training regimen for the soul, a way to exercise your will, strengthen your virtues, and refine your rational capacity. We shouldn't be surprised or dismayed when bad things happen, because hardship is just a natural incident of mankind, part of the deal. Instead, ideally, we should almost welcome it.
Welcome adversity. Okay, that sounds incredibly demanding, even counterintuitive.
It is, but think about his analogy. He often used the example of a wrestler or an athlete. If you want to become an Olympic champion wrestler, do you seek out opponents you can easily beat?
No, of course not. You need tough opponents to push you, to reveal your weaknesses, to make you stronger.
Exactly. Adversity, Epictetus says, is like that tough opponent sent by providence or by nature. It's a sparring partner. Hardship doesn't create your character, but it reveals it. It's the proving ground, the gymnasium for your inner self, your prohairesis. It gives you the chance to display and strengthen your virtues.
Okay, that reframing is powerful. Adversity as opportunity. This naturally leads to focusing on the core virtues needed to strengthen that moral agency, that ability to act well despite difficulty. We should probably define those key ones precisely. Courage, endurance, perseverance.
Yes, distinguishing them is important. Courage, Andrea, for the Stoics, is the ability to act rationally and virtuously despite feeling fear. Crucially, it is not fearlessness. Fearlessness might just be recklessness or ignorance of danger. Courage sees the danger, feels the fear, but does the right thing anyway because reason dictates it.
Got it. Not absence of fear, but mastery over fear's influence on action. What about endurance?
Endurance criteria is the ability to act, to persist in rational action, despite pain, discomfort, weariness, or difficulty. This is a virtue Epictetus clearly knew intimately through his own physical lameness. It's about bearing up under hardship without letting it break your resolve or compromise your principles.
And perseverance, how is that different?
Perseverance is closely related, but it's more about the ability to continue acting rationally and pursuing your goals despite repeated failure or setbacks. It's about not giving up when things don't go your way initially, or even repeatedly. These three, courage, endurance, perseverance, they are like the muscles of the will. They strengthen your agency and enlarge the realm of possibility for its effective exercise, no matter what the external world throws at you.
It really sounds like the philosophical blueprint for creating agency, for finding power, even in situations where you seem to have none externally. And the ultimate goal then becomes aligning this strengthened agency, this rational will, with the way the universe actually works, living in agreement with nature.
Yes, that's the ultimate aim for a Stoic. Living in agreement with nature means aligning ourselves with the divine rational principle, the logos or providence that governs the cosmos. It involves understanding the rational necessity of events that occur outside our direct control and accepting our role within that larger order.
This is where we get that famous, and sometimes controversial analogy, the foot analogy. It can be difficult to square with modern ideas about individual rights and avoiding suffering.
It is challenging, definitely, and we need to approach it carefully. Epictetus used this analogy to explain the providential worldview. He says, imagine a foot. For the foot to fulfill its function as a foot belonging to the whole body, it might sometimes be fitting, even necessary, for it to walk in the mud, to tread on thorns, perhaps even in extreme circumstances to be amputated for the sake of the survival of the whole body.
Oof. Yeah, that's harsh. It suggests that individual suffering or even destruction might be required, might be rationally acceptable for the greater good of the cosmic system, the body of the universe governed by the logos.
That's the implication. It emphasizes our interconnectedness and our role within a larger rational whole.
But doesn't that risk sliding into a kind of fatalism? Or just moral passivity? If I simply accept that my suffering is maybe necessary for the cosmos, when is it right to fight back against injustice? When is it okay to say, no, this isn't right? How do you draw the line between accepting fate and abdicating responsibility?
That is the absolute pivotal question. And the answer, crucially, lies within our rational capacity, our prohairesis. It is entirely up to our individual reason and judgment to examine the specific situation. Epictetus taught that we have a duty to fulfill the role assigned to us by the logos, our role as a parent, a citizen, a rational being, unless doing so fundamentally compromises our moral integrity, our core self, our prohairesis.
So integrity trumps role.
Yes. If the situation becomes so unbearable, so degrading, that maintaining your role requires you to act unvirtuously to betray your reason, then your higher duty is to preserve your moral character. And in those extreme situations, reason might dictate that you walk through the open door.
Which is the Stoic euphemism for
choosing voluntary death, yes. Suicide, seen not as an act of despair, but as a final rational choice to preserve one's moral integrity when all other options for virtuous action are closed off.
So the choice isn't just blind submission to fate, it's a final assertion of rational control, based on which action best preserves the only thing you truly own, your moral character, your prohairesis.
Exactly. The ultimate decision always rests with our capacity for rational evaluation. It's the ultimate backstop, the ultimate declaration of psychological control, even over the boundary between life and death itself. And this intense practicality, this focus on the choices facing real people in difficult situations, is why Epictetus seems less concerned with the purely theoretical sage sophist of earlier Stoicism.
Right, the sage being that sort of mythical, perfectly rational, emotionally detached ideal figure that maybe never actually existed?
Probably not. Epictetus focused much more on people like us, people making progress, prokoptantes, toward virtue. The progressor is the fallible person, the imperfect individual who is consciously striving to live more rationally, more virtuously. They're committed to doing their best, day by day, to live a free and thoughtful life, even if they stumble.
So his philosophy wasn't for the perfect sage, but for the rest of us.
Absolutely. One scholar called it an ethics of the interval between wisdom and its contrary. It's a philosophy for people who know they often fall short, who sometimes get angry or afraid, but who are continuously trying to apply the principles to get back on track to make progress.
That makes the whole system feel infinitely more accessible, more human. It lowers the bar from unattainable perfection to attainable effort.
Yes. And the ethical qualities his school emphasized were practical, attainable ones. Things like integrity, inner freedom, courage, sturdiness or resilience, and conscientiousness, doing your duty well. These were virtues that resonated deeply with traditional Roman values anyway, and they gave ordinary people, and yes, even slaves, the moral tools and the inner footing to face down a world that often felt corrupt, unpredictable, and overwhelming.
It's just remarkable, isn't it, that this man, born property, physically limited, forcibly expelled from the center of power, living in relative obscurity in Greece, created a philosophy so potent, so practical, that it would eventually shape the inner life of the most powerful man on earth, the emperor of Rome himself, Let's move on to that incredible legacy.
It is an amazing story, and we only have access to his profound teachings, really,
Yeah.
because of one incredibly dedicated student, Arrian, Flavius Arrianus. Epictetus himself, perhaps following the Socratic tradition or just his own inclination, didn't write anything down. His teaching was entirely oral.
Like Socrates.
Exactly. Very conversational, using questions, probing assumptions, exposing inconsistencies in his students' thinking. A real dialogue. Arrian, who studied with him probably in the early 2nd century AD, meticulously recorded these lectures, these conversations. He captured that engaging, direct, sometimes humorous, often challenging style in the works we now know as the Discourses and the shorter, more aphoristic handbook, the Enchiridion.
And the fact that Arian preserved that oral conversational feel is probably key to why it resonated so widely, right? It doesn't read like a dry treatise.
Absolutely. It feels alive.
Yeah.
And that vitality ensured his influence spread, percolating through Roman society, eventually reaching the absolute highest levels of authority. It feels almost like a historical accident, but one with profound consequences for the empire.
Which brings us to Marcus Aurelius.
Indeed. The connection is fascinating. If you read Book 1 of Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, his private philosophical journal, he meticulously outlines the debts he owes to his various mentors and family members for shaping his character.
Right, it's like his personal acknowledgments section.
It is. And he credits this mysterious, unnamed tutor, someone in his mother Domitian Lucilla's household, possibly a slave or a freedman, with teaching him some really foundational, almost proto-Stoic lessons early on. Things like enduring hardship and discomfort with patience, the importance of self-reliance, needing little, doing his own work, and crucially, how to disregard slander and not meddle in others' affairs.
It's incredibly symbolic, isn't it? The man who would become emperor, inheriting the greatest power in the known world, credits this humble, possibly unfree individual with teaching him more about essential moral character than maybe some of the most famous rhetoricians and philosophers hired to formally educate him.
It really is. It suggests that the lessons of inner integrity, perhaps lived authentically by this unnamed person, were far more valuable and impactful than the most polished political rhetoric or abstract philosophy. But the direct link to Epictetus comes a bit later.
When Marcus actually reads the Discourses.
It's exactly. Probably as a young man, maybe in his 20s, roughly a century after Epictetus had been exiled from Rome and was teaching in Nicopolis. Marcus Aurelius encountered Arrian's transcriptions of Epictetus's lectures, and clearly they hit him like a thunderbolt. He didn't just read them, he internalized them. He made Epictetus's core principles, the focus on prohairesis, the dichotomy of control, the acceptance of fate, the duty to the cosmos, his personal philosophical blueprint.
So when Marcus finally became emperor, inheriting this immense burden of power and responsibility, he effectively brought Stoicism, specifically Epictetus's practical, resilient brand of Stoicism, back into the very heart of the imperial palace. He even quotes or directly paraphrases Epictetus in his own private meditations.
He does. The meditations are, in many ways, a sustained private dialogue with himself, constantly applying and reinforcing Epictetan principles. You see him constantly reminding himself, test your impressions. Don't judge externals as good or bad. Accept your role in the logos. Remember what is truly up to you. These are all core Epictetan concepts applied directly to the immense pressures of ruling an empire.
And in doing so, Marcus achieved something quite remarkable, didn't he? A kind of reconciliation between Stoic morality, with its emphasis on inner virtue and detachment, and the demands of Roman political authority, something that figures like Seneca, who advised Nero, had tried and arguably failed to sustain decades earlier.
It's a powerful demonstration. It proves, perhaps, that the ethical teachings forged in the experience of slavery and exile can genuinely enlighten and guide even an autocrat, someone wrestling with the immense burdens of ruling the world, trying to maintain justice and order while simultaneously managing their own inner state. The slave teacher ended up guiding the philosopher king.
It's the ultimate vindication, really, of Epictetus's central claim. True power, true freedom, doesn't reside in your title, your wealth, or your external circumstances. It resides entirely in the quality of your will, your prohairesis. Marcus Aurelius's philosophical commitment, lived out under the incredible pressures documented in the Meditations, stands as this enduring testament to the power of those lectures delivered by an exiled former slave in a provincial Greek town. What an absolutely breathtaking journey. Epictetus, the acquired property, the man whose body was marked by servitude, who transformed his utter lack of physical liberty into arguably the most powerful philosophy of under psychological sovereignty ever conceived. His words gave strength, resilience, and a path to freedom for generations, culminating, astonishingly, in the spiritual and ethical guidance of a Roman emperor.
He demonstrated, I think, more powerfully than almost anyone through his life and his teaching, that the true constraints we face are almost always internal. They are our faulty judgments, our irrational fears, our willingness to attach our well-being and peace of mind to those unstable external indifference. The parallels centuries later are striking. People like Viktor Frankl finding Stoic truths brutally reaffirmed in the concentration camps.
The last human freedom.
Exactly. Frankl realized that even in the most horrific, dehumanizing circumstances imaginable, a person is always left with the final freedom, the choice of their attitude, the choice of how to respond internally to their suffering. That's pure Epictetus, rediscovered under the most extreme duress. It's the ultimate lesson in unbreakable personal agency.
It really is.
So if a slave in Nero's court, a man facing daily indignity, physical limitations, political persecution, and eventual exile, if he could achieve absolute mental freedom, genuine serenity, by mastering his judgments, by viewing adversity as necessary training for his character, then the question Epictetus implicitly poses to you, the listener, right now, is this. What self-imposed obstacles, what powerful attachments to external things, maybe it's money, maybe reputation, fear of failure, maybe just social media validation, what are you currently holding on to that prevents your own unimpededness? What chains have you, perhaps unknowingly, placed on your own mind that prevent your complete psychological freedom? The tools are there. The volition is yours. The choice rests entirely with you. You are, or can choose to be, the sole sovereign of your mind.
A profound challenge to leave us with. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the incredible life and enduring influence of Epictetus.